Danielle Hargenritter here, and welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Today, I have a really exciting interview to do. I have two people, which is my first time, two sisters. Hallie Wiedner is a recent University of Dayton grad who now works at a nonprofit organization in Nashville. Don't worry, I always tell people this is real life. I've had doorbells ring, cats walk through, so don't feel like guys, this is real life. So Hallie Wiedner is a recent University of Dayton grad who now works at a nonprofit in Nashville. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 10. Landis Wiedner, who is Hallie's sister, is the co-creator of the series Type 1, which is a comedy about Matt, a guy in his 20s with type 1 diabetes who's looking for love. So Hallie, Landis, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Great. Good. Thanks for having us.
No, my pleasure. So I'm going to go with Hallie's story about diabetes first, as we usually do. So Hallie, if you're willing to share kind of your story of diagnosis and how you got from where you were then to where you are now, working at a nonprofit and kind of kicking butt.
Yeah, sure. So, do you just want me to, okay.
Yeah, whatever you feel like sharing. This is, it's very casual. Tell us about how whatever you remember from being diagnosed and kind of.
So when I was 10, I just remember losing like a lot of weight and being sick all the time and being really thirsty. There's actually this one story of we were skiing in Michigan, and I drank everyone's water at the table, and my mom was like, I think something's wrong. And so a couple weeks later, I had a doctor's appointment. My mom said it was for a physical, just so like she wasn't going to be like, tell a 10-year-old, hey, I think, you might have type 1 diabetes.
That was nice of her.
So it was February 25th. I remember that. And it was also Ash Wednesday.
Oh.
And and then they made, it was the first time I had to like, pee in a cup.
Yeah. That's fun.
And I had a lot of anxiety about that when I was 10 because I didn't want to do it, but the nurses like made me, and I was like, this is so weird. I've never had to do that before. And they're like, well, they're trying to like hide it why I had to do that, but checking for ketones and all that. Yeah. So then we had to wait in the waiting room afterwards, which was weird too, because that's never been for doctor's appointments, usually you leave right after. Yeah. And so they called me back in, and they were like, my pediatrician was like, yeah, so you have type 1 diabetes. You need to go to the hospital. And I was like, what? So then we went to the hospital that night. My mom and I did. And I just remember, really from the hospital, I remember a lot of crying, screaming, not wanting to give myself, because it was a big shock. It's not genetic in my family. So I got it from a virus. So it was just kind of more shocking that way, I guess. But I remember just like these dancing blood sugars on like the TV screens trying to like, teach you about it. And looking back now, I'm like, yeah. Or like these really like bad like 80s movies of like teenagers being like, yeah, I tell my friends if I'm in a bad mood, like just give me a donut. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm like, what? So, yeah. So I remember a lot of. That's what I remember most about my diagnosis, I guess.
Yeah, I have a similar thing because, do you hear that? Is that just me?
I don't hear it.
Okay, good. So for me, it was the same thing. I'm the only person in my family who has type 1 diabetes, and nobody, so it was really shocking. And I remember a lot of screaming and crying because for me, it was more the finger sticking that hurt than the actual needles, but it was just like total shock. I don't remember the dancing blood sugars. I think they gave us like a pamphlet that was like this big, and we're like, okay, go ahead. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know. It's kind of
shocking for your family, and so I'm sure so we want to talk about what Landis is doing here too. But so for you, what we kind of like to talk about here is like, you seem, like you're doing pretty well now. Obviously you just graduated college, you're in a nonprofit. For me, growing up, I was over 200 pounds. I had an eating disorder. My A1Cs were 13+% all through kind of my teenage years. It was a pretty rocky area. So do you have any struggles that you've overcome or things that you've found over your kind of years with diabetes that you found ways to deal with better, or anything in particular that you feel you've triumphed over or are working on triumphing over?
I would say it's always I don't know if there's one, instance or obstacle, because it's always I also have epilepsy.
Okay.
And that came a year later, that diagnosis. And people have asked me before, which one, which is a weird question, but I've gotten this question a lot. Like, which one would you rather not have, or which one would you rather have cured? And I always say diabetes, which people are shocked to hear, because you can see epilepsy more prevalent, like, I guess, because they can see easier. You can't see really all the work, like, what I feel like with all the technology with diabetes. I have a pump, I have a Dexcom sensor that I don't really wear that as much as I should.
So you can probably see the lump on my arm right here.
Yeah. But, and I always say, I wish diabetes, because life would be so much easier.
Yeah, there's been a lot of articles written recently, and not just recently, about how diabetes is invisible. I mean, most people can't see your pump. Most people can't see the Dexcom. Most people, in my life, I've had seizures twice from diabetes, but that was when I was in my teenage years, and I was, again, like completely out of control with my food choices and things like that. But if you're doing mostly the things that you should be doing, and you're not suffering heavily, of any real kind of miscare or mistreatment of yourself, most people have no idea of the amount of decisions that we make in a day. I mean, I think I read a study about like people with diabetes make on average like 300 to 1,000 more decisions every day, just based on carb counting, food, bolusing, corrections, just these kind of things that we do. It's like, because we're literally using our brains to act like a pancreas, whereas most people are just, their pancreas just does this stuff, but we're actually manually inputting pancreatic functions. So yeah, I get how that would be the one that you'd want to be cured.
Yeah. So, but going back to your original question, which I guess I didn't answer, but I was just kind of thoughts. I was like,
yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's.
And if there's not, it's not a big deal. Just like, we like to.
Like, everything's just always been a balance. Is what I found, and sometimes it's a harder balance than normal, or than other times. Things will obviously, life happens.
Yeah.
Dog barks. Things throw it off, but that's like okay. And I don't know. Like you said, we are our pancreas, so it's like I don't know. I think realizing that it's not always going to be perfect is all right, which used to stress me out. I don't know. It still stresses me out going to the doctor sometimes, going to the endocrinologist, because they're like, you're A1C. But
I think that's a really good point, though, is that, and this is something that I think helps when a lot of people make that realization, is that you really just have to take it one day at a time. It's not, and I always I'm a big kind of advocate of perfect. Like, we should eradicate that word from our vocabulary altogether, because it doesn't exist. Not only does it not exist for diabetes, but it doesn't exist for anything. Nothing is perfect. So we kind of strive for this perfection, but we can never, ever, ever get it, because guess what? It's not real, and you can't get something that's not real. So we kind of are always turning our wheels. And when we finally get to that point where we're like, okay, it's not perfect, and that's cool, and that's just the way life is, I think that does kind of lift this invisible weight off of you, and you're like, yeah, sometimes stuff's not going to go right, and guess what? That doesn't make me a bad person, and it doesn't make me incompetent or anything like that, because I think diabetes kind of does make you struggle with that mental kind of feeling about stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So let me hear a little bit about, so Landis, has been sitting there patiently, listening and waiting to share. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and kind of about the project that you are heading up now for kind of a new kind of diabetes advocacy, which I think we need a lot more of, which is humor. So yeah, give us a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, well, a lot of it was inspired by what Hallie has shared. You know, I would hear so many people talk about type 1 diabetes. They'd be like, oh yeah, my friend has it. He just, you know, checks himself. He doesn't even think about it. It's just no big deal. And I was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, but then what really hit me was a conversation I had with Hallie a while ago, a long time ago. And when she said, you know, if I could get rid of one, it would be the type 1. And that shocked me too, just because that's when I really, really understood how, but even though I still don't understand how much goes into it, like I acknowledge that, you know, I'm like, I get it, that I don't get how much goes into type 1. And then Hallie and I lived together for 2 summers in my studio apartment.
That had to be fun.
Yeah. We got real close.
You had no choice.
And we spent a lot of time together, and we'd go out together and stuff, and just seeing people's lack of tact around her pump in particular would, like, as an older sister, enrage me.
Yeah.
And I was like ready to, you know, like go fight someone. But then I was like, okay, well, how can we take this and, you know, try and educate, you know, take this part of ignorance and try and educate by using comedy and kind of shine a light on this part that people don't know about it. And people remember things when they laugh.
Yep.
And that's where this all came from. It was like, it really came from being angry.
Well, it's good when you're angry and you find a good outlet for it instead of, you know, beating someone up. You made a comedy series, so that's really actually pretty productive.
So, yeah, and, you know, and I've been doing comedy for a few years, and my co-writer, his best friend also has type 1. And so we were talking about it, like, why not just create this really funny show that, you know, shows what it's like living with type 1, and breaks stereotypes, and also shows, you know, shows the day in, day out, but also shows kind of how ridiculous people can be. Like in our first episode, you know, he's on a first date and the girl, like, you know, goes nuts.
I watched it. It was really funny. So the guy in the first episode, he really does have diabetes, I'm assuming?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. Oh, so he's acting. Okay.
Yeah. We put out a casting call, but we had a hard time finding an actor in Chicago with type 1. So but we got Martin Morrow, who's a great actor in Chicago. But yeah, we just wanted to show, and like also talking about like the A1C, like there's that infomercial for the pump, and it shows like the doctor, you know, it says like in the infomercial, it says, you know, the pressures of A1C, and then it says this doctor, like, you know, doing this finger wag, because like, and I took that just remembering all of the hard times, you know, of Hallie going to the doctor and like having that stress of like, you know, and the pressure and everything. And so it's hoping to try and catch that, like relating to the type 1 community and being like, that maybe we could like laugh about that how like, and that we like really over dramatize what, that's not the right word.
No, I think it's right.
That's it. You know, and making it look like really like, you know, infomercially and stuff. Just hoping to create a place where people with type 1 can say, oh my God, yeah, that happens to me too. And also hoping to create a place where people can say, I had no idea. Because I've gotten so many responses from people saying, I had no idea the pump was that complicated. Like, and they're like, your sister does this every 3 days, you know?
Yeah, I have had people say to me, they're like, oh, I thought your pump just did everything for you. Like, you just connected it. I'm like, no, every single thing my pump does, I tell it to do. And then they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. You're right. People don't realize. And that, like, even other things, when I watched that pilot, I think it was like 8 or 9 minutes. But one thing that really struck me or made me laugh was that, you know, that the guy, he went to inject or check his blood sugar or something. And the girl was like, what are you doing? And I remember, you know, I've been married for 8+ years, but before that, of course, I dated, and I've had diabetes for 25 years. So one time a guy was like, can you go do that in the bathroom? I'm like, no. Can you go to the bathroom if you have a problem with it? Like, I got like really annoyed. I'm like, and obviously never saw him again, but I'm like, no, you go to the bathroom if you have a problem with this. Like, but people just are like you said, the tact. They're like, they don't, like, no, your pancreas is working. Sorry, mine doesn't work. And I'm going to inject, you know, this is before I had the pump, but I'm like, ew. Like, so.
Again, like I'm getting angry again.
But your show kind of does that. That's what I says, like, oh, that's happened to me. Like, oh yeah, that's what happens. So it's, you know, it's hitting the mark on that one.
And then the bigger goal is that, you know, by raising this awareness, it will create, you know, people to want to, you know, generate more funds so we get closer and closer to, you know, even better care and closer to a cure. You know, it's like there's this whole, like, because I feel like if people know what this is and know, you know, where this research is going, there would just be more concerted effort, like just outside of the type 1 community.
Absolutely. And there's lots of efforts going on inside and outside. And, you know, I think advocacy in any form that is telling people, look, this is way more serious than people perceive it to be. It affects way more people than people have any idea about. And it's not just like, oh yeah, I just check my blood sugar and I never think about it. No, pretty much anybody who has diabetes thinks about it like 24/7. Not because they're obsessive, but because guess what? Like, we want to live and we want to live well. And if we don't think about it, then we're doing ourselves a huge disservice, because if we don't think about it, then we can't act like our pancreas would. So it's not even like really a choice. So no, I think what you're doing is great. And so Landis is and she's running a Kickstarter, which I can say from personal experience of last July is a lot of work, but also gratifying. So tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter. And as usual, Landis will send me the link and I'll post below the blog, and go over and check it out. I've backed it because I think it's a really awesome project, and I'd like to see more episodes because it's funny. And I've never really seen a TV show about somebody who has diabetes trying to date in the real world, because I think that's like a really good topic. So tell us about the Kickstarter and how it came to be, and what we're trying to do here with that.
Sure. Yeah. So we launched our Kickstarter on National Diabetes Day, and the launch of our pilot was the same day. We're running it for a month. And the rewards start as low as $5 and go up to $10,000. So if you feel so inclined. But what this does is it helps fund. We've written 7 other episodes to finish out season 1. And we pay everyone that we work with, except ourselves.
That's how it always starts. Trust me.
Yeah. We want everyone to know that their time and talent is valued. So every actor, every videographer, every location, everyone gets paid for their time and their work and their dedication. And so that's why, you know, it does cost a lot to create something like this, but it also makes it turn out really well when you're compensating people for their work. So, and we're also right now putting together an advisory board made up of only people with type 1 diabetes, because we've written these 7 episodes, but we also want to make sure that we're touching on issues that are important to the type 1 community. So that going forward, you know, we've got in these episodes, we've included things that, you know, really hit and really want to make sure that that's got.
So does Hallie ever give you insights onto what might be, I don't know what Hallie's relationship status is, but what that might include in looking for love in the world of living with diabetes? Or are you involved in that at all?
Hallie was like on call for me. like I would call her the most random questions, and I'd be like, I don't even remember what they were, and she was like, yeah, that's okay, and we just like hang up, and like, and I call back like 7 minutes later. So
no, it's good to have a sounding board though, because otherwise you're just kind of guessing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
She definitely saved me from probably making like big errors. So because we're like, the last thing I want to do is do this wrong. So.
Yeah. Let's offend everybody with diabetes.
Yeah.
That's good to have her. She's your safety net. That's good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I do expand the advisory board to beyond Hallie. She's still on it. I don't know if you know that yet.
I know.
But she's on it. So yeah.
Good. So yeah, so I actually went to the Kickstarter that's where they can watch the pilot episode. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. You can see the pilot episode, learn a little bit more about the project, and choose your reward. There's cool things like a blooper reel. You can get your name in the credits. You can get a calcifer tattoo, which you'll get once you see the episode. Yeah, so there's a lot of fun stuff. You can get if you want a cameo in there, you know, we can write a little character for you. So there's tons of fun stuff that are rewards to be a part of it.
Awesome. So yeah, no, I'm very excited, and I'm gonna actually make sure to get the word out as much as possible, because how many days? So this will be, so as of tomorrow, how many days will be left in your Kickstarter campaign?
15.
Okay, so we're about 2 weeks out. So go check it out. Go follow the link below and check out the Kickstarter campaign. At least watch the pilot episode, which definitely gave me a few laughs, and see if you want to be part of creating a very funny type 1 comedy, because I think we need to be represented out there in TV land, because that's another thing. And I've heard, I'm really active in the diabetes online community. I'm like very much a big part of it. And one thing that I've seen a lot of people complain about is the representation of diabetes in TV shows, and the misrepresentation where they'll be like, oh, her blood sugar's low, get her some insulin, or blood sugar's high, like get her a donut. And you're like, what? Like they couldn't even Google it? Like seriously? Like, so I think we need that representation to be accurate. I think that would be very helpful for that rage that some of us feel sometimes, where we're just like, what are they even talking about? Don't they have the internet?
Yeah, I feel like that happens all the time too. And there hasn't been a protagonist with type 1 in a very long time. And I just feel like it's overdue.
Yeah, I agree. So normally towards the end, I usually ask what your top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes are. So we could give some from Hallie, and then maybe some from Landis from living in a studio apartment. With what are some tips for thriving with diabetes as a person with diabetes? And what are some tips for thriving with diabetes while living with somebody who has diabetes? Maybe you could like give your little secret tips on that, because I know a lot of people out there live with somebody and love somebody who has diabetes, but they're, not sure how the best way to support them might be.
Yes, I'm trying. Secret tips. Trying to think of some good.
You could just say, what do you do that works for you?
Sorry, this should come easier.
No, it's okay. I mean, I have an unfair advantage because I interview people all the time. I imagine you're not on the other end of this all the time, so it's totally fine. Don't worry about it.
It's so funny because my fridge is stocked with apple juice boxes, and it makes me miss Hallie because she moved to Nashville and she lives in Nashville now. But every time I see it, like my fridge is just stocked with apple juice boxes, and that would be a good tip for someone living with someone who has type 1. It does make me miss my sister every time I see them, so they just stay there.
Yeah, funny story. When I first met my husband, he lived with his younger brother, and I didn't move in right away. We dated for a bit, but when I moved, I bought like juice boxes to keep at his house because I was there often enough. And then one time I went low and I went to the fridge to get the juice boxes, and they were gone, and like all of them. And his brother had drank the juice boxes thinking that they were his. And I'm like, Tom, I'm dying. You have to go to the store right now. You have to go to the store and I can't even remember. I was like out of my mind. And like one of the two of them just drove to there was like a convenience store that was like right around the corner. I'm like, God, I'm like, don't ever drink my juice again. So yeah, keeping juice on hand. Even if you have a friend or loved one that has diabetes that is only at your house sometimes, just having like a spare 6-pack of juice boxes can make a huge difference. So I think that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Very good tip.
Yeah.
So anything else? Any other important tips?
Careful when you vacuum. I found the cap that goes over the pump. on the carpet the other day, and I was like, I could have vacuumed this guy up. Oh my God.
Probably also get used to having test strips everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even notice that anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there's some good tips. And so is there anything else you want to add about, so it's called, the series is just called Type 1. Yeah? Okay, cool. So anything else you want to add about Type 1 or anything else you want to add at all before we wrap this up?
No, we just really appreciate your support just so we can continue making more episodes, and every donation helps.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to support. Like I said, I know what goes into Kickstarter, and I'm always about supporting creative people who are trying to make a difference in the community. And also, I believe, other than insulin, laughter is the best medicine. So I think that we need a lot more of that, because a lot of times living with diabetes is not funny, but you need to be able to laugh at yourself sometimes, because otherwise life just is too dark. So I'm very grateful for what you're doing. I totally support it, and hopefully other people will get over there and back and pledge, and we'll get some more episodes. All right, so thank you very much to Hallie and Landis for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care, guys.
Thanks.